This is Professor Pelton. This is Algebra 2, Chapter 6, Section 4. This is Part 3 of the video. So we have to look at the functions and tell what transformations were done relative to the parent. So again, in prior chapters, I gave you a list of the transformations using the standard f of x function, which is any function you want it to be, basically. The function in this case will be the exponential function. And you can go through the list. It's also at the beginning of the chapter. So if you look back at the beginning of this chapter, I'm sorry, this section rather, I also gave you the list, which is specifically for exponential functions. Okay, same rules, but specifically written without an f of x, but with an exponential function, and the order still should be obliged. So if I look at the first one here, what is the parent of this? The original parent is f of x equals 3 to the x. That's the parent. So what's going to happen here is I have a 3 and a negative 5, right? There's a 3 right there and a negative 5 right there. What are those things doing? Okay. Well, first off, the negative 5 is a translation right 5 units, because adding and subtracting to the inside, writing starting in general is a translation, but the inside is horizontal. The 3 multiplied up there is a shrink, because multiplying by 3 is counterintuitive in the inside, so it must be a shrink. And on the outside, it would be a stretch. So shrink horizontally, because in the inside affects x, outside affects y. Shrink horizontally by a factor of 3. Okay. All right. Next one, we have a 1/8 and we have a negative. So then 1/8 is right there, obviously, and the negative is right there. So it's on the 1/8 is on the outside, so that affects y. So that's a vertical shrink by a factor of 8. Okay, so on the outside affects y, so that's vertical. Multiplying is always multiplying and dividing is always stretching and shrinking, which is scaling. The negatives are reflections. Since it's in the inside, it's affecting the x. Since I'm changing my x value, I'm going to reflect on the y-axis since I changed my x value. All right, pause the video, try the student problems for yourself. Okay, so we have the negative 3 here and the 1 because the original parent is 2 to the x, which is the original exponential function, or the base of it. So the negative 3 is an adding and subtracting on the inside. So that translates right 3 units. And the adding 1 to the outside is translating up 3 units. Remember, on the outside, y, it's straightforward, but the inside is counterintuitive. All right, e to the x, the base is just e, so the original parent was e to the x. So whether it's e 2, 3, it really doesn't matter. It's still an exponential function either way. So I have a negative 5 here and a negative. So on the outside, adding and subtracting, that's a translate down 5 units. And the negative is in the inside, so I'm changing my x value. So it's reflecting in the y-axis since I changed my x value. Okay, 2 more. So I have a negative and I have a 2. Well, again, the negative's still on the inside, so it's still reflection on or in the y-axis. And the 2 is on the inside, but it's multiplying by 2, so it's actually counterintuitive. So it shrinks. It's in the inside, affects x, so it shrinks horizontally by a factor of 2. All right, last one, e to the x is our parent here. The parent over here was 0.4 to the x. Okay, so we have a negative here and a 6. So the 6 is in the inside, so it translation left, because the inside is counterintuitive, 6 units. And the negative is on the outside, so it affects y. Negatives are reflection, since you change the value. Reflection it's on the outside, so that affects y. So if you change your y value, you went over the x axis. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so a parent of 2 to the x here, and we want to do these three things. Shrink vertically, translate left, and reflect on the x-axis. So following the proper order of transformations, which is horizontal translations come first, scaling comes second, reflections come third, and vertical translations come fourth. Of course, we only have 3 of these things, so the translating horizontally comes first, the stretching and shrinking or scaling comes second, and the reflection comes third. There is no horizontal here. So f of x plus 4 must happen first because we're translating 4 units left. So that's in the inside because that's x and it's counterintuitive. So to replace x with x plus 4. So the second thing is shrink vertically by a factor of 5/6. So that must be on the outside. Since it's vertical, it's y. So it's 5/6 times f of x. Can't combine those because they're not like terms. X won't happen first anyways. And the last one is reflect in the x-axis. If you reflect in the x-axis, that means you changed your y value. So that is on the outside. So that's negative 5/6 times 2 to the x plus 4. So the new function that we've made we'll call g of x. You can call it anything you want. Use h or whatever you like. Is negative 5/6 times 2 to the x plus 4. Okay, pause the video. Try the student problem. So e to the x is our parent here. We have 3 things we need to do. Stretch horizontally, translate up, and reflect on the y-axis. According to the order of transformation, the stretching must come first, the reflecting must come second, and the translation up and down must come third. Horizontal translation would come first, but there isn't one in this case. So we're going to stretch horizontally by a factor of 3. So horizontally is x, that's in the inside, so we must divide by 3 because it's counterintuitive in the inside. So that's e to the x over 3. Second thing is reflect in the y-axis. If you reflect in the y-axis, you changed your x value. So that must be f of negative x. Therefore, you get e to the negative x over 3. And lastly, translating up 5, that's changing y. So that needs to be on the outside of adding 5. So that's e to the negative x over 3 and plus 5. So our new function, which we'll call g of x, you can call it anything you want, just not f of x, is e to the negative x over 3 plus 5. Okay, that is the end of part 3.